Hello everybody, this is Jeffrey Booth for the Stories for My Lights YouTube channel, and I am here to tell you that I got a strange request for my book. So it kind of told me that it said your improvised stories are getting a little sloppy, so it wanted me to try something different. It wanted me to try writing down a story while I was at Panera Bread having so much tea I started shaking around, and then try reading the story and see how that felt and what that looked like. And so today, that is what I'm gonna do. Now, the story that I'm gonna tell you today is about a skeleton and his skeleton family and skeleton village. He's the most unlikely of heroes, and he also defeats the most unlikely of villains in the most unlikely of ways. So join me as we join our skeleton Baggins in his epic adventure. This is called The Dancing Skeleton. "Are you sure that we should be doing this?" Baggins the skeleton asked, his bones clacking together as he lifted the lid off of the chest. "Of course," his best friend Baggo, who was also a skeleton, said. "All right, if you say so," said Baggins as he finished opening the chest. Inside was the largest crystal that either of them had ever seen. It was multifaceted and shone with a strobing green light. They looked at it gleefully, gave each other a skinless high five, and closed the lid. They each grabbed one handle of the chest and carried it back to Baggins' house. "Where are we gonna hide this?" Baggo asked. "Your parents will not be happy that we are hunting for treasure again." "I'll just put it in my closet and not bring it up," said Baggins. "Besides, we didn't actually doom the village with the relic we found. Eventually the ghosts went away and found another village to terrorize." Baggo smirked, as best as a skeleton with no skin or muscle in his face could, and they both walked home, chit-chatting the entire way. They went down a dark and dirty path through a forest of dark oak trees that were devoid of all but a few lingering leaves. A massive, larger-than-life moon mooned ominously in the sky as the crows chatted incessantly in the distance. This was home. Baggins took a deep breath into his empty chest and sighed in contentment. Eventually, they arrived at Baggins' house. It was built of cracked stone and covered in moss, mold, and many other fungi. Small bits of wood still clung to the bones of the old house, but most of it had decomposed in the long years that his lifeless family had inhabited this humble but cozy abode. They crept up the steps to Baggins' room, wincing as each step popped, creaked, and groaned. They slipped into his room, set the chest quietly into his closet, and said goodnight. Baggins laid down in his bed and drifted off gently to sleep. Yes, despite not having a brain, skeletons still, for some inexplicable reason, needed to sleep. He had strange dreams of ghosts and goblins and, yes, dancing? The entire night, he was haunted by lingering visions of dancing and swaying to strange music, unable to stop for all of eternity. He woke up that morning in what would have been a cold sweat were he a human. Since he was not, his bones merely had a strange coolness about him that filled him with a sense of foreboding for the coming day. Baggins shook his head, he clacked his teeth, and he headed into the bathroom. Skeletons, you see, had a very vigorous morning routine. Not only did they need to brush their rotting teeth, but they also had to brush and polish their entire body so they could look presentable. Once his bones were as white as could be expected, he opened his jar of bug paste and he applied it artfully all over his body to give the illusion that he was rotting and decomposing more than he actually was. A look which those in his village had taken quite the shine to. Once ready, he went and lifted the lid to the chest, and he bathed in the majesty of the gem. It seemed to be shining brightly this morning, and the odd, ethereal strobing, it intensified which pleased Baggins to no end. He could not wait to tell Baggo. After having a short breakfast of worms and dirt with his family, he rushed off to school. It was a rather boring and uneventful day. He had a conversation with a girl he had taken to a fancy to in haunting studies, which did please him. In his class on scaring children while evading their parents, he had a chance to speak with Baggo. He told him about the crystal. Baggo seemed oddly quiet, and he seemed to wince at the news, and he quickly changed the subject. Baggins found this strange, but he chalked it up to his friend's usual erratic behavior. They were, after all, undead, and Baggo was strange even for an undead. That night, as he returned home, he once again shared an abbreviated dinner of worm paste with his family. He heard his mother and father talking in muted tones about something happening in the next village over, but he paid no heed and rushed up to his room once he was done eating. Once again, he gazed upon the gem. He knew he shouldn't touch it, for clearly it was some kind of magical relic. He and Baggo had resolved that it should only be for decoration, and maybe perhaps to sell to a merchant when they were older. They had promised one another. He closed the lid, went to bed, and tried to clear the image of the ghostly green from his mind. And eventually, he fell asleep. The nightmares returned. He was dancing, and he couldn't stop. He was undulating rapidly to a distant drum that sounded as if it were a giant harp. Boom, 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 boom. His body moved and shook, and he couldn't control it. A form coalesced in front of him. At first, it appeared to be nothing but a swirling cloud of black smoke, but over time, it took on the shape of a skeleton, donned in fearsome black armor. 2 eyes, gem-shaped and glowing red, pierced through him. "You think yourself able to tangle with me?" it asked in the voice that sounded like stones smashing and steel grinding. Baggins was unable to answer in the dream, but the pace of his dancing intensified. "Very well," said the dark creature. "Soon we shall meet and settle this once and for all." It snapped, and with that loud crack, it morphed into black smoke and sped away. Baggins woke up and spent the remainder of the night watching the moon arch through the sky, unable to sleep. Though he couldn't explain why, he knew that there was some sort of significance to his vision, some portent of the future. For the rest of the day, he felt as if he were in a fog. He interacted with his family, he went through the motions in school, and he even played some video games with Baggo on his PlayStation 10. But those red eyes haunted him. He just couldn't let them go. When he returned home that evening, he found his family nailing planks of fresh wood over their windows. His father seemed really nervous. "What's going on, Dad?" Baggins asked. "Oh, getting ready the best we can," he said. "I don't know what else to do." "What in the underworld are you talking about?" Baggins asked. His father stopped hammering and looked at him with a suspicious glare, the black of his empty eye sockets fixed on Baggins. After a time, he asked, "You don't know?" Baggins shrugged, and his father sighed, walking over and setting a bony hand on his son's shoulder. "The town of Roddington, it's gone." He paused for a moment. "All of the buildings, they're destroyed. The skeletons and the ghouls are nothing but dust. A few zombies managed to escape and told us the story. Something very bad happened there." "What?" Baggins asked. The chill that ran through him bespoke of a knowledge that he already had, but still, he needed his father to say it. "A creature," his father said. "Black," to hear them tell it, with red eyes shaped like gems. It's hard to know what to believe, for you know how zombies are. They said the creature challenged their leader to a dance, and when the leader refused, the creature snapped its fingers, and the village turned to dust. Unbelievable, I know, but the sheriff did look, and the village, it's gone. Baggins turned from his father, walked into the house, passed his mother, called to him in greeting, and he went immediately to his room and closed the door. He knew this had something to do with the treasure he and Baggo had unearthed. The dreams. The fact that he was dreaming of this creature, that its eyes were gems. This could not be mere coincidence. Not knowing what else to do, he paced back and forth for some time until fatigue overtook him, and he laid down and blessedly found himself in dreamless sleep. Unfortunately for him, the peace of the sleep did not last long. His father burst into his room sometime in the night when the moon still lorded high above them. "Son, come, we must run." "Now," his father said. Baggins could hear his panic. "Father?" Baggins asked, still tired. "The creature! It is here! It is demanding that the village leader dance!" His father paused and shook his head. "But that lousy coward is gone. It has given us 5 minutes only before we perish." His father grabbed his hands and tugged him towards the door. "No," Baggins said. "Now is not the time, son," his father said, and again tugged on his shoulder. Baggins pulled his hand loose and rushed toward the closet. He opened the chest and he motioned his father over. "Oh, no, not again," his father said, shaking his head. The green glow made him look more dead than usual. "I am sorry, Father," Baggins said. "I'll fix this. Just get everyone else to safety." His father turned away and ran. Baggins could hear his feet clomping down the stairs. He heard murmurs, and then the door slammed, and all was quiet. Baggins grabbed the gem, and immediately he felt warmth, a sensation that he had not felt since he first became a skeleton, but he felt it flow through him. He lifted the gem and set it on top of his head. He felt the gem attach itself. He tried to lift it free, but found that it was stuck tight. He went to the mirror and looked, and it was glowing brighter than ever. But it was not the only thing that glowed. His eye sockets burned with a furious emerald color. Had he a heart, he would now be feeling it pound. Down the stairs he walked, almost as if he were in a dream. He opened the front door and walked down the cobbled path toward the town center. Long before he got there, he could see the black creature towering over the village, its red eyes piercing through the night. In the same terrible voice from his dream, it roared, "Dare anyone accept my challenge?" "I accept your challenge," Baggins yelled, before his brief moment of courage could fail him. The red eyes found him. The creature stomped toward him furiously, crushing trees and houses. It closed in on him with a frightening rapidity. "I see you have a little help," it said, pointing towards his head. "It won't be enough." "We shall see," Baggins said. The creature laughed and clapped his hands, and otherworldly music burst into being, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It had strange undulating horns, an electric guitar that shook the ground itself, and drums that sounded suspiciously like a combination of the creature's footfalls as it crushed buildings and a beating heart. "I'll go first," the creature said, and immediately it burst into dance. Baggins watched, crestfallen, as this hideous creature danced. It had an unprecedented elegance about it, especially for a creature its size. It turned, it bowed, it leapt, it kicked, all in sync with the music, all with an amazing grace, all with a sinister smile. Its dance made the world feel timeless. There was only it and the music. At last, it stopped. "Are you ready?" it asked. Baggins nodded his head. He couldn't force himself to speak after what he had just witnessed. The music restarted, and he began dancing. Much to his surprise, his body moved on its own. It mimicked the moves of the creature, but with more grace, flexibility, and speed. It seemed to be a light counterpart to his opponent's dark dance. He kicked, and he tumbled. His body began glowing. He flipped, he dove, he punched in the air in fury. Towards the crescendo of the song, when the electric guitars raged with an unearthly fury, he spun, and he kept spinning until he hovered high above the creature's head. He spun faster and faster, so fast he felt as if space and time would rip apart. In an instant, a green beam, brighter than the sun, and hotter too, blasted from his fist and hit the dark creature in the chest. It bellowed and raised its fist in anger, and then in pain. It thrashed as the green light covered it, first faint, and then so brightly it looked as if the sun had risen again. With one last violent shriek, it exploded into 1,000 sparks of green, and then it was gone. Slowly, Baggins sank to the ground. He stood, disbelieving what had just happened. He did not know how to dance like that. He had not known what he was doing. The gem fell off his head, but before it could hit the ground, it transformed into a shimmering mist that eventually turned into a small fairy with 4 wings and green skin. "Why, hello there, Baggins," the fairy said, a smile adorning her face. "Thank you for helping me. My name is Winkerbell." He looked at her, stunned. "What?" was all he could manage to say. "I've been waiting for a time unknown to deal with our little friend. Had you not unearthed me, allowed me to make use of your body, he would have spread over this world like a dark plague." You did it all," he said. "I just watched." Winkerbell smiled. "Ah, but without a leap of fiery courage that you took, I could not have done it. I have something for you, a small thank you." She flew over to him, opened his hand, and into it dropped a necklace with an emerald jewel on it. The jewel glowed green and pulsed faintly. "If ever you should find yourself in the darkness, with all hope gone, hold this in your hands and call for me. I will come," she said. She smiled, circled with her hands atop her head, and disappeared into nothingness. As it turns out, the village would never know what he and Winkerbell had done to save them. They merely thought the creature had grown bored and left. He did not feel inclined to tell his friends or family for fear that they would never believe him. He did, however, resolve that he would leave things best left untouched alone in the future. And this included raiding ancient tombs for treasure. All we can say for sure is that in the future, in a time which we do not yet know, he did have to call on Winkerbell. And she did come. And they did fight great evil. That, my friends, is a story for another time. I would like to thank you for letting me read my story to you, which sounds weird because I'm supposed to be improvising stories. However, writing is a form of improvising. Anyway, if anyone is watching this, I would appreciate you tell me if you thought this was better, worse, or the same than the others, or if you found it was distracting that I was reading from a screen. I would also like to wish to my son Alden a most beautiful good night. I want you to know that you are loved, and my heart is always with you, even when you're not home. Farewell, my friends. We shall meet again in the future.